Restaurant Unstoppable. What the most successful restaurateurs know that you don't.
I make you make a drink for time?
For time?
You can try to beat the record again. This is Isaac.
He almost beat me up.
What's up, Isaac?
How we doing?
Great,
I
man.
will be nervous, but I think I can do it.
Alright.
Are you gonna talk shit when I finish and tell me it's not perfect?
Oh.
Yes, you are.
You told us such a different story during
I'm
the
gonna be
interview.
completely honest. No, like if they do, yesterday he beat my time, but he had 2 under 4s, so it didn't count.
I get it.
So it has to be a perfect drink in order for the time to work.
Nice.
But you agreed that it wasn't perfect.
Yeah,
right?
it wasn't perfect. You're right.
You got this team just won.
Wow.
Sweet 16.
Just a second. Let me make sure I'm all set up, Leo.
Ice man back here. You'll be the one with that video proof, too.
True. Or it'll just be my failure.
So what should I order?
Oh, definitely the gardeners.
The Gardeners.
Yeah. You okay with a little spice?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Ready?
Alright.
Set, go. Oh, smart. Okay. Man down.
How are we doing on time?
27. He's on pace.
Okay.
Or they're good. Oh, deep drop. Copy of the ice. $54.96.
54.9. How does that compare?
I'm about to tell you. I think it's the new record.
New record. Oh, man. We have history. Congratulations. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, co-founder of SoCal Cantina and founder of Cocktail Conjuring Inc., Leo Holtzman. Leo, my man, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Yes, I'm feeling unstoppable.
Dude, I cannot wait to get into today's conversation, but let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I was actually asking my staff what that would be, and they were like, do it now.
Do it now. Why is that what your staff suggested?
Yeah. It goes through like a lot of different reasons. So it can be something as small as like, for example, we're adding a new 86 board to our kitchen, and we were using a whiteboard, and just a guy hit on the door and it would fall apart. So I was like, well, I'll just get idea paint, which is a whiteboard paint. And it was we just decided to do this on the day before St. Patrick's Day. So
Okay.
I come in at like 7 in the morning, and I'm looking at my business partner who's like helping out with all the prep, and he's like, "Should we do that now?" He's like, "It's gonna have wet paint during St. Patrick's Day," and I was like, "Yep."
And was it wet during St. Patrick's Day?
Yeah, I mean, it takes like it takes like 4 or 5 hours to drive, but it's so usually you would be like, maybe we should wait on a slower day, but that's kind of like my mantra is like, get it done with so you can move forward.
I love to say there ain't nothing to it but to do it. So and there's a lot of truth to that. Sometimes we'll make this to-do list and it just grows and grows and grows, and we never get around to it. But you gotta, even after like a 12-hour day, you got to find that little bit of extra juice in the tank just to crank out these things that are going to make your business better. Because if you don't make time for it, you're just going to stay in one place.
Exactly. So from those 12 hours, that 1 extra hour of work, as long as it's towards a system or something that's going to propel your business forward, it's better to just get it over with now, because it's going to make the rest of the year easier.
Yeah, man. Ain't nothing to it but to do it and just get it done. I love it. So where does it make sense to start sharing your story? And just for a little bit of a precursor, and this is a compliment, what I'm about to share. I don't usually let people on the show who reach out to me, who are listeners to the show, because I do try to keep that level of my guests calling out future guests, because it's just a natural filter and it's word of mouth mentoring, right? But you reached out to me and I looked into it a little bit, and I was like, wait, there's something here. And I'm happy you did reach out to me, because you have an incredible story, man, of just perseverance and overcoming. Like, you think you get your break and then your building gets destroyed. We'll get into that. You were on a path to being a magician, and you just discovered the world of cocktails. I just think that your story is awesome, and I love your hustle. So I'm super excited to get into this, but where does it make sense to start sharing your story?
Yeah, I mean, I guess from the first time I ever stepped behind a bar, which was in college, I went to UCF. My idea there was to go work for the Mouse as a magician. I had already won the International Brotherhood of Magicians in 2006, the close-up champion of the world.
Yeah.
In the junior category because I was 16 at the time. And so that's what I always wanted to do. And I was like, what a better place than UCF? Disney World is the land of magic.
Don't make my microphones disappear. They're expensive. So what point in your life were you like, okay, because you went to school, you did have hospitality in your background.
Yeah. Well,
This is while you're doing your magic. So there must have been something inside of you that thought maybe hospitality was just.
Well, I actually triple majored, so it was
Yeah.
theater, psychology, and event management. So
Okay.
the psychology effect was for obviously like the perception aspect of
Yeah.
magic. Then the hospitality was for more how to like sell yourself.
Okay.
Theater for the performance, but like because it was more event based. My dad was into events, so I was like, if I'm going to be a performer, I need to find out what my real worth is to these event managers and how to work my budget in with them.
Okay, so back to the hospitality aspect where you said if you studied hospitality because you wanted to learn how to sell yourself. What made you think that hospitality was the path to do that?
That's where the biggest market for magicians was doing like Christmas parties and big events for companies, and when CEOs throw their parties, a lot of the value for the magician is we actually give like an out for them to have, so they're showing someone something instead of trying to be like, oh, I can't talk to you right now, so after
Yeah.
they get the deal done, they're not wasting time with the same client that's trying to overbuild a relationship.
And that's a good point when you think of what obviously being a magician, there's the actual skill, like a chef would have a skill, right? But at the end of the day, you're also selling yourself in the events because you're an event company first, really.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't even think about that. So at what point, take us to the point where you're like, okay, maybe magic's not going to be my path.
Yeah. So like I was bartending at UCF, and I would do it's called the Moat Sports Bar, where they're not open anymore. It's been quite some time, but I actually lied and I said I had already bartended before, and I just to get the job, and they were like, man, you're the most it took them like 6 extra months to open, but once I came through, they're like, we were the most excited to have you work, and I was like, I knew I had something to prove, so I just stayed one page ahead of the group. And I was like reading all these cocktails, and I was reading up as much as I could on bars. And, I faked it till I made it. And I became like their main bartender. I was doing magic there.
So this is at UCF.
Yeah.
And you said it was the Moat?
The Moat. It standard for the mother of all tailgates.
Okay.
It was a bunch of guys that had like a cool tailgating idea for UCF.
Got it.
And they all put their money together and opened a bar. So they also had no idea what they were doing at the time.
So you had something to prove because you kind of fibbed and you didn't want to basically, disappoint anybody. Right?
Exactly. Which, which made me, I think it probably actually helped me because I didn't want to be caught in that. So I just was always, pedal to the metal, doing everything I could to be ahead of the crew.
Okay. And I know you also worked at the Cadillac Ranch. That was at UCF too, right?
No. So, all right. So finished school, was going to do magic. I was still doing it in the off season. Like I had booked a lot of events, I was doing really well, but there's on season and off season, right? So after Mother's Day is basically the same as restaurants. It's during the summer is the dead time for performers and events. So I didn't really have a lot of work. And that's when I graduated and I moved down to Miami.
Okay. When you were working at the Moat, was there anybody that kind of saw something in you? Was there a key mentor here that helped steer you on this path? Or at this point, were you still pretty much committed to magic?
I just like to learn everything around me. I'm kind of I guess a little bit of an academic if you
Yeah.
ever done like the enneagrams
Yeah.
of your personality. So I just like to learn everything around me. So I did have 2 like mentors there, but I didn't realize it was from, restaurants until I ended up opening a restaurant.
Okay.
You know.
What year? That was fast forward in a few years, though, right?
For which
The first restaurant you opened.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's, I never thought I would ever be able to open a bar. I didn't really have come from money or anything from that, but I guess we'll get there soon.
So your first business, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the Cocktail Collection?
Yes, that
Okay.
was the first bar we opened.
So before that, you also had the Cadillac Ranch. You also had SLS South Beach, Ketsula. Am I saying that right? Ketsula? Katsuya Dragon Lounge, which was out in Las Vegas.
No, that was the South Beach.
Okay.
So these are all the bar jobs I had up until the point where I was able to open my own space.
So at what point were you thinking, like, what point did you recognize that you might have a unique talent as a bartender?
I would say probably not really until all the way up until I was at SBE at the Katsuya at the Dragon Lounge. That was the first time when I was like, maybe this is what I do forever.
Okay. What made you think that?
I had so when I was there, I had at that point I was the Cocktail Conjure. That's my Instagram's account, and the idea was to do a magic and cocktail show. So I was already kind of incorporating it, trying to differentiate myself and offer like a different experience where I would, the show was I would do like 10 minutes of magic, make a really cool cocktail and tell a story about that and tie that in. And it was basically, a 40-minute show with 3 drinks in between.
So this is what I love about your story. When we had that phone call while I was driving down here, that really like pulled me in, because the big lesson up to this point, and it hasn't really even fully come out yet in our conversation, that what is your unique selling proposition? What unique thing do you bring to the table that you can lean into to create a unique experience for your end user, right?
Yeah.
And for you to combine your skills with magic and to incorporate that into your talent for creating cocktails. I mean, I just feel like it's like you're instantly just like a powerhouse, like, because very few people can compete with that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I talked to my girlfriend about this a while ago, and she was basically like, you doing magic, even though you don't necessarily have it in, like, you don't perform all the time anymore, a lot of the way that the thought process of creating a trick and an act, like all the inner workings of it, it's reflected in a lot of the systems that we do in our restaurant, which, allow us for a lot more efficient and sometimes, like, the magic of service, people don't realize, they're like, how the hell did I get these 4 complicated cocktails on my table in 2 minutes?
Or how did my plate just disappear in front of me? I didn't even, just being able to swoop in and not be noticed and just like create that seamless experience, right?
Exactly.
Same
as much
thing
as you can.
Yeah. Right. Was there anybody who like really pulled this out of you and like helped steer you on this path?
I wouldn't say there was anyone specific as far as like combining the magic and cocktails. I would say that was kind of my own just brainstorming. Like, I was working at a restaurant. I was trying to think, how am I going to make it? Where is it really going to click? And, I was doing alliteration. That was the cocktail conjuring. It was just kind of like really thought processing and seeing how it could work. But there was someone who first brought the idea that I could open my own bar.
Okay.
Because I thought I only had to, with the event business was different. I was only looking to sell myself to the people that would hire me for those events all over the world. I wasn't thinking of like a continuous like audience.
Okay. So this person that identified that you could open your own bar, was that after Katsuya?
It was actually at Katsuya. So I left for
Okay.
2 months to go travel Europe because I was young and I could,
Nice.
which was a great experience.
Side note, if you are young and you're listening to this and maybe you're in high school and you want to go to college for culinary, I'm not going to say don't do it, but go travel and get that experience before, because
Yeah.
you're not going to make a lot of money when you graduate culinary school. And I think having that experience, being able to travel and to experience hospitality throughout the world and to go work for great places, like super. Were you working when you traveled or not?
No, I was just backpacking
Okay.
through Europe, and
But
I
still.
did do magic like on the side of the streets,
Okay.
like for euros.
So I feel like you, correct me if I'm wrong, you developed the most as a hospitality professional at Katsuya, correct?
Oh yeah, that was the first time I realized what a cocktail could be.
Okay, so let's dive into this. Take us through your experience at Katsuya.
Okay, from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I was just leaving Cadillac Ranch. I had worked my way up and basically been the general manager, acting general manager of the space, and then they got bought out, and so I knew my job was gone. And I was like, all right, well, what's next? And someone said, you're a great bartender and you really know this business. You should go to SB and SLS. They're opening a hotel.
Okay.
So I went there. The interview process was super brutal. It was like 2-3 weeks. I had to go like 6 times to South Beach, which any mainlander will tell you is not an ideal situation, And so after they asked me all these questions, and at that point I didn't really have great liquor knowledge or idea of cocktails or, any knowledge of botany. And so when and the manager liked me and liked my personality, and they really hire on personality first. And so she offered me a position as a bar back. So I went all the way from the very top of the restaurant to the bottom of the food chain.
I think that's so smart, though, and I think a lot of people don't do that because they look at it as going backwards, but you got to look at what your ceiling is where you are, right? So you got to take a step back sometimes to get away from whatever ceiling you're under to get a higher ceiling, right?
Yeah, and that's when you learn the most too.
Yeah.
Like I kind of now that I own a full blown restaurant, part of me wishes I would have added a few years in a kitchen as a line cook there, so I had more of that traditional learning from there.
What specific things would you have hoped to learn from the kitchen before opening your own place?
Just different ways to run the kitchen. Like everyone has a different style, and I think it's helped us that we have a different thing, but then we have other guys come in and, sometimes we've edited our system because there's some things that do work and don't work for us.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to know all aspects of a business for sure.
Exactly.
But we'll get into it. You did find a business partner that complements you.
Yeah,
right? So-
exactly. Which is yeah, it's a great thing.
Yeah. But going forward, getting deeper into Katsuya, really pull us, like, paint that picture of like what was happening. Continue on that path that you're on.
Okay, yeah. So I got hired as a bar back, and it was a posh hotel, so they super overstaffed, as so I was basically working 65, 70 hours a week.
Damn.
And then my paycheck for 2 weeks was like $800. Okay. So that's like 150 hours, which
that's not a lot.
Yeah. And I was doing pretty good before. So I was, but I loved, the cocktails there, because I remember in training, this guy made these drinks and I took a sip and I was like, I'm pretty fair. And I was like, but I definitely need another sip of this. It's called the Burning Mandarin. Okay. It's the first time I saw like spice in a cocktail that didn't destroy the drink. It just kind of gave you like that little reminder that you just had a sip of alcohol.
Yeah, and I think that's where people get caught up, because you're looking at what you're bringing home every week, but what are you gaining, right? What you're being opened up to a whole new world of possibility, right? And you're getting educated, and all that stuff is so invaluable, right? You got to put a price to that.
Yeah, and it's a good time to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes.
So what were some of the big mistakes? What are the biggest lessons you learned during this time, aside from how to do the thing, how to make the cocktail?
I mean, I would actually say, like, just one aspect of the cocktails, and it leads to a lot of our bar program now, is just how many different ways you can fuck up lime juice.
Right.
That's
funny,
because there's a million ways to do it, and they're not all created equal. And I learned that by only by doing it.
Yeah. What about leadership? Were there any people that you looked up to as a manager or as a leader that you pulled a lot of those lessons from them?
Yeah, absolutely. There's two. One was Ryan McCallum.
Okay.
He was the general manager. He's still to this day one of my favorite managers that I ever had. He was a great guy. He was like an actor too, so he had he had a lot of showmanship, and he brought that into it. But he was just able to unite the whole team, front and back of the house. With the way he did his pre-shows, the way he incorporated everyone, and he was able to. A restaurant is a family. So he was able to really have that, distinction where he was definitely your boss, but a lot of people still, would hang out with him, but he didn't cross that line and never lost respect. And a lot of times, a lot of people think you have to have, the managers can never hang out with staff after there. And he broke that all the time. And it really made that restaurant crew like above and beyond. Okay, he was never it was never uncouth or anything like that. It was just like after you all went and got one drink somewhere, he would be there for one drink, and then
this is what I was going to ask. Like, what does that look like? What is walking that line of being with the team and being present, but not crossing it and being too close to the team and getting smashed with the team? Like, paint that picture of how he balanced this. I mean, you already said go out with people, have one drink, bow out. What else?
Yeah. It's just how he was with people. Like, he actually cared about each individual's each individual and like what they were about, and he knew enough about them, but not enough to like pry, just to be like, okay, I just want to understand what's going on in your life.
Just enough to know that you do care. Right?
Exactly.
That you are interested. And that was going to be my follow-up question. Like, how was he uniting the team? He said he was able to unite the team, and it sounds like it was. So he did one. He took the time to learn about the people on his team, just to know who he had, right, and what was there in front of him. But what else was he doing to unite the team? Reflecting back at this time,
he would also give like genuinely good advice that you could actually work out. There's a lot of times when the back house and front of house would argue. Yeah. For a myriad of reasons, and a lot of times he would just explain what situation they're coming from. He's like, look, they just have a table that is hungry, and this is what it wants to go. They just need a time so they can plan for it. So they're not barking at you to get their food out. They just want to be, they just want to know exactly what's going on. Yeah.
So he literally just helped people sympathize. Like, this is where they are, or empathize. Like, this is where they are, and you get to put yourself in their shoes. And sometimes we don't take that time to think about other people's perspective. We're just concerned about our perspective and what's on our plate right now, right? Mm-hmm. So helping people see the other perspective. What else?
So him and this, I'm not sure which one did it, but there was a chef there, David Lesperon.
Was that the second person you were going to mention?
Yeah. Okay. And there was one very specific thing that he would always do, and Ryan would kind of take this in a different way, but it was the same concept. And, sometimes things happen in a kitchen or in a team, and like people can argue, and they, for maybe they're not doing exactly what's expected of them, or they're not doing their job to the T, or they said something, or their kitchen staff hangs out, and maybe it was an emotional thing. And so whatever there would be a tiff, he would go up to him and was like, hey, come over here right now.
And this is David you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he would take out a pad, and he's like, what just happened, and what's the issue? And he wrote it down, and he goes, we're going to have a post shift and talk about this, get back to work.
Yes. Okay. So huge lesson there. What is it?
you can't bring emotion into the game, and like you can't break up the system. You know? Like the job is the most important thing from our opening hours.
Yeah, and don't critique somebody. Don't give them feedback. Don't distract them
in real time
in service. Exactly, because if you do that, that's where their brain's going to be. They're not going to be focused on the job. That I love that act of what's the issue, write it down, and when you write things down, you're like something like 10 times more likely to come back to it or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a trick for like entrepreneurs in general. Like, guys, like you want to know the secret to being your own boss is every day you wake up, write down a list and do each of those things.
And you've probably seen it before where you're out to eat and you see clearly a manager or like a higher up scolding somebody like maybe around the corner from like the main dining room, but people can still see it and hear it. That person's not listening to a damn thing you're saying. They're just thinking about how embarrassed or how much they hate you right now in this moment because you're embarrassing them in front of their colleagues and you know what I mean? Like it's the worst thing to do. So going back to Ryan, thank you for sharing, David, too. You mentioned incorporating everyone. Give me an example of how he would do that and why that's so important.
He would let anyone go from front of house to back of house if they really wanted to. Was one thing. So like he wanted to make sure that you were doing the job you wanted to do that you thought you could do. And then just he would, you know, like there were no cliques in the restaurant. You know, it was one family. So if like he would just call you out basically if someone was talking, he's like, hey, what were you talking about? You know, bring it like in the pre-shift, he would address it.
Yeah. And I mean, just these little things like going back to psychology, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm such a friggin' broken record sometimes, but just seeing someone, right? Recognizing, seeing somebody is one of those human needs. We need to be seen. We need to be recognized. And like keeping that in the back of your mind and, you know, like saying like, oh, like what do you have to bring to the conversation? Like what value, what perspective do you have is so important.
Yeah. And it also like when, like in pre-shifts, he would do a lot of, you know, like kind of like employee tests, just like, hey, like what's in this cocktail? And he would do both sides. So, you know, so there's like, when we did like a group pre-shift, he would ask the kitchen, he's like, what's in the Katsuya fresh, you know?
Yeah.
And the guy would be like, I don't fucking know, you know? And then he would look at it and then he's like, well, think about it. And he's like, okay. And he would be like, okay, maybe I do know my menu. And he could name 2 or 3 ingredients. And then we'd let him know the other ones. And it wasn't to call him out. It would just be like, you need to know both sides of the restaurant across the board.
Yeah.
And it's not good to have that separation where like, you know, if one of their, you know, your staff also advertises your place.
Yeah.
So if they're out and about and someone's like, oh, what kind of drinks do you have? And you're like, I work in the kitchen. I only know the food. I'm like, that restaurant manager failed. I want everyone to love our stuff across the board.
What's the result of constantly making it like habitual to ask your team random questions? What's going to happen?
They're going to learn it.
Yeah. Why?
Because they want to have the right answer. You know?
Exactly. It's that simple. So if you make it a part of your pre-shift, just to start randomly, or just not even in the pre-shift, just randomly start asking. If people know that you're going to ask and you're going to be held accountable, they're going to take that studying seriously because nobody wants to look like a schmuck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Accountability is key.
Yeah,
you know,
I love it.
You have to have that.
Great lessons here, man, on just leadership and just how in management for sure. What about you? How were you evolving at this time? Like, who were you when you came into Katsuya, and who were you when you left?
Yeah, so I mean, so when I went with fresh eyes, and I knew I had the ability to operate a business. Like I've always been able to do that. I was the captain of like my sports team, so I always knew I was good in leadership roles. So I figured out with the system that they had at Cadillac Ranch how to do it, and then with SBE, I just learned a completely different corporate structure.
Okay.
You know, and a different way to run businesses based off of numbers and how you really like code all your costs.
Okay, get into that. What were some of the key lessons that you didn't, the information, the knowledge you didn't have, and what were the key ingredients that they gave you working here?
Yeah, so this was from Ryan too, and it was just basically what percentages you want to hit for all of your costs across the board, and how at the end of the day a restaurant can somewhat be boiled down to numbers. You know, but
do you know those percentages to heart?
Yeah,
drop them on us, man. I know a lot of people know these percentages, but I feel like I don't know who's listening to this. It might be somebody who is just thinking about getting into the industry, or they're dreaming of maybe one day opening a restaurant, but they're still learning. What are those percentages?
Yeah, labor you want 13.5.
Okay.
I mean, all these are also 13.5 or lower.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, rent you want it to be between 6 and 15. You know, anything over 15 makes it pretty tough, and then your soft costs are going to be about 10%. You want your liquor costs to be anywhere between 16 and 20. You know. If you beer 23, wine 22, food costs, you want the total cost. A lot of people use different, you know, menu costing ideas, But you want the general to be about 27, 28.
Yeah, man, I lost track. I was counting. What's that leave us? Are we still going?
Oh yeah, I'm not adding them all together, but we're pretty much all there now.
Yeah.
The rest is you have marketing and profit, but it really only leaves 10 to 15% for profit.
Yeah, and I think the key thing about what you shared, or lower, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people get caught up because they hit the number and they're like, good, check, done.
Yeah.
But how can you go lower, right? And it's in trying to make things better. And like, I think we hit those numbers sometimes. We think that the job is done, but the job is always going. It's always trying to see how you can do even better, because you can make 20, you can earn 20%. Like, I've seen it, like even more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but you also, there is value. Everything's perceived value basically. So it depends what you do to it. So we have like certain cocktails that might have lower overall drink costs, but they're a little bit more labor intensive. So it kind of evens it out, because you do, if you have a drink that takes 2 minutes to make versus a minute, like that is a cost and factor that goes into it.
Well, not even just the actual time, the man hours that go into making that,
And
but
then
the end user having to wait 5 minutes for a drink.
Exactly.
And what that does, how that affects the rest of service, right?
Mm-hmm.
What else?
We're thinking of cost wise. This was something I definitely wanted to hit on. So another thing I learned at SB is like they had percentages for how much you could spend on glassware every quarter and all that. So there would be a time where we're making cocktails and there's no glassware to pour the drinks into. And so that was another thing I learned, is that you can also break those percentages if you need to. So now, like, we always have 10 cases of every single glass that we have in house as backstock.
Yeah.
Because I never want anyone to sacrifice service because they were short on glasses because 10 broke last night.
I love that. And I'm actually, backups is something that I think is underestimated in this industry as well too. And it's something one of the biggest lessons I learned as a commercial pilot. They taught us the 4 B's. It's bottom lines, briefings, backdoors, and backups, right? And I just getting to the point now where I travel with a backup mixer or a backup interface, backup microphones. Why is it so important to have a backup?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so we call it the magic box, and it's actually this little box I bought from Home Goods like years ago for my first bar cocktail collection.
Nice.
And in it is I have 2 of every single tool that we use in here that's specialized to us that you just can't get anywhere, like the exact muddlers that we use.
Yeah.
And as soon as anyone grabs one, they just have to text our group chat, that they took it. So I always replace that because I never, ever want to have not enough tools.
Yes, dude. So get into that system, that check and balance that you use to make sure you always have the right amount of tools. So if they go to, is it like a closet, like a tool closet, that if you take it, and how do they know to text you right afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it doesn't happen all the time. That's why you have 2, and they'll say, "Hey, there's 2 there," and then I'll resend out the chat. Like, I have 2 for that reason. Yeah. And then my managers also check every week inventory, so I know it.
Boom, right there. That's what I was hoping we would get to, is that you have systems to check like your inventory, right? So like just like any other par stock, you create a par stock for your backup closet. Right. Yeah. So you have these checks and balances. All right. Going back to more surface level, thank you for getting into that detail. At what point I always forget the name of this place you're working at, Katsuya. Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, Katsuya.
Yeah, Katsuya. At what point at Katsuya were you like, okay, I can open my own place. This might be my new path. Like, I can incorporate magic, my skill with magic, and become a very successful mixologist restaurateur?
Yeah, so I went to Europe, came back, and then they told me, they're like, you're not going to have your job when you come back, you have to reapply. And then I came back and they're like, oh, thank God you're here. I was like, okay, I guess I'm all right. Yeah. And then so I started work the next day, as like the first day I went in there. And then I think it was either like that night or the following night, this guy, his name was Carl, he came up and he goes, where the hell you been, man? I've been trying to open a bar with you for the last 2 months. And I was like, what? And I was like, I was in Europe, man. And he's like, you're my favorite bartender that I've ever seen on South Beach. I go to all these bars all the time. And he's like, you're bar none the best that I've seen. And I was like, let's open a bar together.
I love that. And I think it's worth bringing to the subject before we move forward that you did take that step back, right? And you're making $800 in 2 weeks, working 70 hours a week. But you also moved up to management in 6 months, right? Weren't you didn't you become a GM or something?
It was like a supervisor manager role.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, it happened mostly because of when I was opening the bar and what they needed from me. I was already kind of doing both because I was very reliable. So like they would sometimes ask me to come and manage certain shifts with them when they were short. Yeah.
But I think the point is, if you have the goods, right? If you're cut out for this industry and you hit a ceiling wherever you are, if you take a pay cut to go someplace else that has more opportunity, if you do have what it takes, it won't take long for you to get back to where you were.
Yeah, if you have great work ethic and you're on time and you're really like absorbing this information and you can actually like use it.
Yeah.
That's a lot of thing. A lot of people learn stuff, but they can't really apply what they learn. It's like, oh, I learned this script of, this greeting, but if you don't really use that script for what it's for, you're not going to get the same payoff. Like a lot of people just run through the words and it's like, it doesn't have to be exactly what we're saying. We just want you to hit these points.
Yeah.
And when you think in terms of that, it makes you just a better, worker all around.
Yeah. Framing instead of
exactly. Framing.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I do everything, because I'm not the kind of person that can remember a script.
Yeah.
I just can't do it. But if you know the general point, the general message, you can communicate it, whatever, as long as they get the message.
And you have to do that for everything. Like that's what checklists are really about too. You're like, there's still 100 things not on that checklist that you have to do, just like being through the restaurant. But there's those key things that if you do all those, everything else will get done.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so you were just telling us about how you were away for 2 months, came back, and there was a guy that was like, hey man, where have you been? I wanted to open a restaurant with you. Take it from there.
Yeah. So I was like, obviously, I'm going to jump at that opportunity. So I got his number, and then I ended up going to his place that weekend, and we actually talked about it in more detail. And he said, why don't you go look for some places, and I'll be the money behind it.
Okay. So he was a guest. This person that when you were gone and you came back, he wasn't a coworker. He was a guest.
Yeah, he was a guest. He just come up there. Like, it was a small, intimate bar that it was, I think 8 seats, and then a service bar that would pump out $15,000 worth of cocktails every night.
So take us through your relationship with this guest.
Yeah, so I must have seen him 5 or 6 times total before that.
That's it.
Yeah, that was it.
See, what I love about this, and I think anybody who's a big fan of the show, who listens regularly, knows where I'm going, but it's worth bringing to the surface. You never know who your future investor is going to be. Treat everyone on the other side of that counter or at the table like it's your future investor, because it could very well, 9 times out of 10, your investors are your customers, right?
Yeah.
Because they know what you got.
Yeah. Even more than that.
Do you want to compound on that?
As far as what aspect of like just times that I was introduced to him, or
well, no, just the idea that like everybody that you encounter could be a potential investor.
Oh,
so every engagement, every encounter is a business proposition.
Yeah. Well, also every guest is an investor. They're literally giving you money and a percentage of it. So like and in a way you're doing mini performances at the end of the day every time with a guest.
Yeah. And it was your magic that really drew him in, right?
Yeah, I think it was both of it. I was at that point. I really loved how those cocktails were. I've never had drinks like that, and that was when I was like, man, these drinks are out of this world. And I was like, so I started to play around with flavors, and I had a knack for that too. So I would offer new drinks to them that were like similar in style to those drinks, because that's what I knew at the time, but that weren't on the menu. And then with that, I would show magic and kind of incorporate it. And then I can also get people to, a big thing for magic is I have one person pick a card, and you have someone on the other end pick a card, and now the entire bar has to be consumed. So it really makes a bar what it's supposed to be.
Show.
Yeah. And there's times when you can go to a bar where people are, if it's like just, a bar up against the wall where everyone just kind of sticks to themselves, and I'm a big believer that a bar is an ordinaire. It's where people go to meet. Yeah. That's what makes it great.
That is the key of really finding a good bartender, and I think a bartender that can do create standard cocktails and do the job well, the technician, right, that do the thing well, is good to have that. But the next level of bartending is developing that dialogue amongst the guests, right, bringing people into conversations like, oh, you should talk to this person. That's next level shit right there.
Exactly. And those are like the little tidbits that I didn't realize that they were the real gold that I had learned. And not so much anymore. Every once in a while, I'll still get behind the bar with all my guys, and I'll bartend for the whole day, and I'll give them little tidbits, and they're like, yo, that's really genius. I never thought of that. Like, one thing I'll do is I'm
so happy you're getting to this. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, so they'll make a cocktail, and it'll be for someone they turn their back, and they're talking to their friends, and they're waiting for the cocktail, and you're like, oh, hey, excuse me, can you I have a drink for you. They're trying to get their attention, and they just can't do it. And I was like, instead, if it's, let's say it's a guy, you go to the girl that was maybe like looking at him and like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you tap that guy on the shoulder for me? Or can you hand this drink to him? It's a little different now with COVID rules. We haven't done this for a while. Yeah. But if you do that, so now that girl has a free opportunity without her having to be nervous about it, of giving this guy a drink, know? And like, maybe it's nothing. Maybe she just gives him the drink and it's innocent and that's it. Or maybe, he starts up another conversation and, it makes their time. But sometimes people need that nudge to really like,
break the ice.
To break the ice. Yeah. And that's a great bartender can do that. And it's innocent, seamless, and you know, he's not, you know, putting anyone out of their comfort.
I mean, I did make a note under when we get to current time SoCal Cantina to get into some of these, because I figured at this point you've collected so many little tricks of the trade and things that you do incorporating your magic. And I do want to dive into some of these things that you can share with the greater Restaurant Unstoppable audience to take up your bartending to the next level. But did you want to get into anything else before we move on?
Nothing's coming to my mind,
Okay.
but I'm sure
let's
as
get
we're
into it
talking,
later.
it'll
And
happen.
for anybody who's listening to this and it's like, Eric, ask more about the magic. Like, don't worry, I'm shelving that. We're gonna get into it. So back to you, this business partner. He propositions you. He says, I want to open a restaurant with you. I'll be the money. Take it from there.
Yeah. So then I just started looking at spaces and setting up meetings. And there were a lot of duds, a lot of, you know, it's not an easy thing to make that next step. And then I had a friend in high school. His uncle owned Tobacco Road, which was the oldest bar in Miami.
Okay.
It had a 102-year license.
Wow.
And so I went up to him, and I think I was like 22 at the time. And I just asked my friend to introduce, and he's like, yeah, I got you. And he had actually asked me for some advice at Tobacco Road because they had closed down the bridge there. So their sales were kind of, you know, not what they used to be. And it was an old dive bar in Brickell, which is like a super up and coming city. So he was just working for his uncle kind of on the side, like nothing official, but he just wanted to pick my brain. He's like, what would you do? And I was like, okay. And they had this upstairs space where they used to do all these shows. And the bar just, you know, because of all the traffic changes and all the, you know, certain things where, you know, they were only doing music downstairs. They weren't really using the upstairs 7 days a week. They would only use it on Saturdays. And so I was like, I would turn that upstairs into a cocktail lounge, you know, and, you know, maybe increase the music or just forget it altogether. And he goes, okay. And this is when the two like came together. So I reintroduced that story and I talked to him about it. And we had that meeting. I was like, well, now I have an investor that's gonna, you know, that willing to open this
who are
bar.
the players? Like, it's you, it's your investor, it's this guy that asked you for your opinion.
Yeah. Okay. So it was a friend from high school,
Okay.
Paul, and his uncle was Patrick Gleaver, who was the owner of Tobacco Road.
Got it. So is there more to that, or can I start pulling back some layers?
Well, yeah. So then, so the next thing was he set up a meeting. I told him my idea for cocktail collection, some of the cocktails I wanted to do it. I made him some drinks. I did magic.
What was the idea for cocktail collection?
So it was 10 cocktails, and it was a semi-rotating menu. So at the end of every month, the 2 least popular cocktails, we would post how many there were, and we did like a save your cocktail party. And then the last 2 drinks at the end of the month would disappear, and we would replace them with 2 new ones.
Okay, that's cool. So it worked. It was a success, was it not?
Yeah, we were crushing it. It was awesome.
So what happened? Wait, before you get into what happened, what does crushing it mean?
I mean, I had thought we could do like $1,000 a day because I was only going to be 2 bartenders and the space that wasn't being used
Net
at all.
or gross?
Huh?
Net?
Yeah. Net
Okay.
a day, and I was like, that would be, you know, great.
Yeah.
You know, that
for
would
sure.
be a huge win for my first place as a little pop-up bar.
Yeah.
You know,
What did you end up doing?
about triple that.
Nice.
So yeah,
That
and
is a
we were
success.
closed Monday and Tuesday.
And how long did you go?
So it was about 7 months.
Okay. What the heck? What happened? Why did it just stop? I mean, it sounds like it was a success. Why did it just stop?
Yeah. So Tobacco Road was being looked at like the landmark, the historical landmark committee.
Okay.
And at that time, they're also building what's it called? Brickell City Center.
Okay.
Right, which is like it's like this huge mall. I'm sure you saw
Yeah, I
when
know
you were
nothing
driving
about
over
this,
here.
honestly. I was too focused on getting here because I was running a little behind schedule today.
You should definitely walk through it. It's cool,
Yeah,
but it's
okay.
like a $1 billion
wow.
mall. It's and like really high end stores, and they had the 3 lots, and there's still nothing official, but everyone, you know, it's still probably going to happen in a couple of years. They wanted that lot for Brickell City Center,
Okay.
and the historical committee was coming by to try to make, you know, Tobacco Road a landmark, so that land wouldn't have been worth anything.
So the owner, Patrick, was like, I got to take this paycheck.
So, well, no, Patrick had already sold the land. So
okay.
it was another guy. They sold it years ago for, I'm not sure the price, but I'm sure they did okay.
Okay. So basically the building got demolished.
Yeah. So the whoever the landlord was at that time, I'm not sure of his name, but he basically made sure that it did not exist anymore. So
Where-
now you have 2 buildings and an empty space in between.
Oh my gosh. So where were you emotionally at this point? Because you hit gold, right? Like you figure, like you opened your first place. It was a success. I'm also curious too, because Yeah, answer that question first. Where were you emotionally when that happened? When your success came to an abrupt end overnight?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a super emotional person, you know. It's just, and there wasn't too much I can do it. So, you know, we get to have one really amazing send off party, you know, Tobacco Road, where I have pictures of it. There were like tens of thousands of people there. But I was just like, all right, well, what do I do now? I definitely took a week where I just like thought about like my next move, but I didn't really take it too hard, to be honest. You know, it was frustrating, but
move on, right?
Yeah. What am I going to do?
Roll with the
Sulk?
punches. Yeah. Hopefully you're putting some money away if you're making, you know, $3,000 a night for 7 months. You probably had a little bit of a cushion.
We did have a build out cost, you know,
yeah.
and I did have a deal with that. So I was definitely financially worse off at the end of this than when I started. Because when I was at Katsuya, I was just saving money.
Yeah.
Because
Smart.
my brother's an architect, so we were the ones that designed it.
Okay.
So we did all that work together. So I was just doing that in like overtime.
So what I'm curious about is how did you set this up? Because I think, and I wanted to pull back more layers on this before, but now that you've kind of shared the story, I think it's good to get into it. There's always a big venue somewhere that has a little nook or a little cranny that's kind of just tucked away, and there's not much happening in there. Like, that's an opportunity to be a separate venue, right? Like, look for those, like, go discover your city, climb into every nook and cranny of every building and look for these vacant opportunities, right? Or just underperforming spaces. Approach the owners and say, can I do something here? A pop-up, right? If you have a following, if you're a well-known bartender or chef or whatever, like, go find these little nooks and crannies where there's a kitchen or a bar and see if you can't work out a deal. Because that's a great way to get started.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
you learn a lot.
Yeah. So what I'm curious about is how did you set this up financially? Like, what were the books looking like? Were you renting the space, or like how do you what's your advice for renting a space within a space?
So it really depends on the owner, because they have it depends on both sides and what they want.
Yeah.
I generally say, like, what I always try to get at the end of the day, like, you can skin the cat however you want. So you need to have your basic mold, like what you need to make the business successful. So I try to just make sure they get 20% off the top, so it's easy for them to record, you know, and then leaves 80% of the sales for me to figure everything else out.
So it's basically 20% rent.
Yeah. And it's just for those numbers. You figure your soft costs are 10%, and you figure your rent is between 6 and 15. So we'll just go on that. So 10% for the soft cost that they don't make, and then 10% is what they're really making off of that.
Okay. And you got to keep in mind too, now this business, if it's successful, is pulling business into the space. So if you're successful and people show up, maybe you have a wait into your little nook.
Yeah, or maybe you don't offer food and you only do drinks.
Exactly. So you're going to bring volume into the space. So there's definitely benefit there. What are some of the things, what are the pros and cons to this?
I mean, the pros are definitely like lower startup costs. You ease with opening because you don't have to deal with all the licensing in the city and the build out. The downsides are you definitely lose out the pie in the sky theory, right? So, you know, usually you have a baseline rent. So once you sell $1 million, everything after that is way more profitable because you don't have your rent's already covered.
Yeah.
With a percentage rent, that never happens. You're always giving that piece. So it does make certain things like Uber Eats would be really difficult to do in a percentage rent because you'd only have less than 50 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, that's a good
to
point.
pay for everything.
But I mean, at the same time, if you got to give up a little bit of something if you're just getting started, because you're also building a reputation, which is invaluable in itself. You're networking in that moment. You're developing a name for yourself, right?
Yeah, like I mean, it's in the long run, it's probably not the best idea to do it because you're better off getting a loan or getting someone to just fund you
if you can.
If you can,
yeah.
But this is a really easy way to do it, especially because the design wise, it's a good and bad thing that you can't control the space, right? Because you're gonna have to use whatever design they have, but you also don't. That's also a little bit of a. It also kind of helps with the cost of building out because you don't have to worry about the build out. And then no one's gonna really judge a pop up too harshly because the paint on the walls isn't extravagant.
So not to date you or anything, how old were you when this was going down? What year was it?
This was for
2014?
Cocktail Collection was about 2014. Yeah.
Yeah. And how old were you?
So I was
24.
24.
24.
Yeah, I'm 32 now.
So 24 years old. How many 24-year-olds out there can go get a loan to open their own place?
Yeah, exactly.
So like you got to give and take a little bit. But what you're going to, again, back to our point earlier, you never know who's on the other side of that bar. It's your future potential, investor. So like you can create something. You can show people what you got. You're marketing yourself every night. You know, you're getting your name out there. If you got what it takes, you got to put yourself out there any way possible. And I think that's what you were doing in this time, because this experience set you up for your next success, did it not?
There was a little bit of a break, but it definitely did, because I always knew I could do that. You
Yeah.
know, because like after we closed, I ended up we were a very popular bar. So and it was right when Tinder was around, so we used to do Tinder Tuesdays. So whenever I would walk in Brickell, everyone would call me Tinder Tuesday. But
that's smart though. Like,
yeah, no,
to lean on the trends that people, like, wherever people connect, however people connect, lean on that. Be a space for that.
yeah, exactly. You know, and it was early. It was right when that was starting to pop off. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 7 years ago.
That's probably the benefit of being 24 years old, because like most of the other operators that are in their 40s and 50s and 60s aren't looking at these new emerging apps and trends. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you can capitalize on that.
I think about that now, you know, because now I'm probably a little bit out of the loop, and I'm like, so what's next? Am I there? You know, I think great cocktails and awesome tacos will always be in the. So.
Back to our lesson from Ryan, though, incorporate everybody. Because now you're employing 22-year-olds, 18-year-olds. What are they doing?
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, like, let them feed into where's the opportunity, guys, because you follow the young people. Whatever the young people start doing, usually everyone else catches up to a year or two after.
Yeah, and that's all our staff. I always ask them, I'm like, where do you guys go? You know?
Yeah.
Oddly enough, a lot of them come here.
Yeah, I love it. Did I cut that story short? So yeah, the building gets demolished. You take a month or a week off or whatever to regroup. What next?
I started doing pop-ups. So I did cocktail collection pop-ups. So it was the same idea, but instead of the whole week, I only did it one day a week. And I had a partnership with American Social, which is a bar that's still here. And like, they've opened several locations. They're great guys. And they had this little bar called the Kennedy Bar, and it was a separate side room. And I would just do it. I believe it was on Thursdays, and it changed a couple of different days of the week. But they had just opened, and they had asked, you know, who's a really good cocktail guy, and they're like, we asked 5 guests, and your name came up 5 times.
Wow.
So they set up the meeting with me.
That's exactly how I find guests on Restaurant Unstoppable, by the way. I let other people refer.
Yeah.
And like whoever gets the overlap is usually who I go after. It's a great way to figure out who's who.
For sure.
So I want to spend some time here, because I think for the at least a few years, I was big on pop-ups, being the way you break into the industry, finding vacant space, working out a deal with the owner. What advice do you have for scouting the space and for working out those deals? Is it same as before, the 20%?
I'm trying to think exactly how we did it. I think it was actually reversed there, because, you know, depending on how it is with the licenses and all that is, you know, they were like, well, we'll buy all your liquor. We don't want outside liquor there. And they would buy the fruit and everything. So it was actually flipped. What I did with them is I got 20% of the sales.
Okay.
And then they kept everything else.
Okay. Which did you like better?
Which, it was difficult because I had to depend on a management team I didn't know to order certain stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and then I wanted specific liquors that they didn't necessarily have, and then they had to hold on to that stuff. So it's definitely better the other way, but when you do one day a week, it's, you know,
you don't have much.
You don't really have
leverage.
much. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so when you're doing a pop-up, what are the things you learned the hard way? Things that most people don't consider their first few times out doing pop-ups.
It's when you're doing one day a week, it's very, very, very tough to build your crowd. You know, you need that repetitive, like when people love your place, that they can come in 2-3 times in a row to get addicted to it, quote unquote.
And you bring up something that I was curious about. When you had this original location, the cocktail collection, that was the fixed space, were you collecting emails? Were you doing anything to develop a relationship with these people?
Yeah. I mean, I was doing Facebook and emails, but it was a pretty primitive style because I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just doing it the hardcore way, you know, writing in an Excel sheet, you know, recording myself with business cards, you know.
How are you collecting your guest emails?
Business cards, going to networking meetings and just contacts, getting the information. Yeah. You know.
So this is something that I think is huge, where a lot of people miss the opportunity with pop-ups because of the point that you're pointing out. Yeah. You're moving constantly. So they have to know, they have to stay plugged in to who you are and where you are and what you're doing. So you have to develop a channel of communication. So get creative and find a way to get contact information when you're doing these pop-ups, so that these people can, if they like you, they can follow you, right? You gotta build that list. It's your most valuable tool.
Yeah. You know, had I did it again, I probably would have had a little more exclusivity in it and made it more like you got to find this pop-up. So you got invited and it's only open. I kind of like blasted it on Facebook to everyone I could and tried to just get the word out, which
is a list.
It's a
list.
It worked, but it definitely wasn't efficient. And, you know, knowing what I know now, and how I would run it, I think it would be much more successful, and I would have demanded certain things before making that partnership.
And the reason why I say email is because email is one of those things that just won't go away. Like everyone's always going to have an email address, but Facebook might not be cool anymore. You know, Twitter might not be cool anymore. It kind of isn't. You know, people move away from platforms, but they always retain their email address.
Yeah, I wonder which one's going to stay. Instagram seems to be pretty strong right now.
Yeah.
You know, that's pretty much all we do for our restaurant right now.
Yeah. Any other lessons as far as things to consider when doing pop-ups, scouting space, logistics?
Like I said, I would try to get a place that you could do a pop-up for an extended period of time. Like, you don't want to just do one day a week. That's a lot of work for one day of sales. Yeah. And, you know, if there's another event going on or something like that, or there's a million reasons someone might not be able to come one day.
Yeah, got you. How long were you doing these pop-ups before you got the opportunity for SoCal Cantina? This is 2014, right?
Yeah, I'm a little cloudy on the timeline, but it was quite a while.
Well, you guys just celebrated 5 years.
Yeah.
2001, reverse engineer,
yeah.
2016.
Yeah, 2016 is
so
when.
there was
about 2 years.
About 2 years. What was going on in that?
Yeah,
2
so
years?
we did the pop-ups, and like I said, I was doing it, but it was very tiring. It was very nerve-wracking. Also, like every Thursday, I'm like, I wonder if anyone's gonna come today. You know?
Yeah.
And I was like, if no one gets here, Leo doesn't eat.
Yeah.
You know? And then so I got a call from the Palms Hotel Group. They own 2 hotels on South Beach. And they offered me the corporate mixologist position. So I would run, I believe they had 5 venues.
Can you hook me up with a free room while I'm here?
Yeah.
Really?
Possibly. I mean, I got to contact them.
Let me cancel my hotel.
I haven't been there for a while. It's a beautiful hotel, too.
I was just kidding. But keep going.
I'll get you a pool pass and you just don't leave.
All right. Sounds good. I'll take you up on that. It's a little dangerous right now with all the crazy spring breakers. But whatever.
Yeah, that hotel should be pretty safe. It's a very nice, relaxed hotel and spa, and like closed out to everyone else. But anyway, so they had 5 venues and 2 hotels. And that was when I realized that I really knew how to operate multiple places, because it was a pretty easy job for me. And, you know, everyone was I'm trying to think of his name.
So you're operating 5 units within the hotel?
Yeah, they had all the bars, not the full units,
Okay.
right? So I just was in charge of all the programs.
So what did your life look like? Sorry, you're just getting into it. Go for it.
Yeah, well, that was actually my problem with it. It ended up being you had such a huge group of personnel in the hotel, and that my job was really just coming up with specials and getting press. Right, so I had to meet with a lot of, you know, bloggers and, you know, critics, and I would just bartend only for like an hour or 2 just for them, and really cater and show them amazing time with drinks and magic, which was cool, but it seemed disingenuous because everyone else couldn't do what I did. You know, as far as the magic and bringing the cocktails and entertaining, you know,
How'd
that many
sit
people.
With you?
It felt, I don't know, a little like contrived, and it felt like it didn't feel like what a bar was also about, because also for like the hotel restaurant businesses, they don't necessarily want to make a profit.
Well, the other variable too, right? There's that. Plus, you're not going to deal with the regulars.
Never,
at a hotel.
You'll see them maybe once a year.
It's a very transactional experience.
Exactly.
Versus a bar where you're dependent on the same people coming.
Yeah, it's much more community based what we have now, and I much prefer that.
Yeah.
You know,
so
they're both great, but
how did you grow? How did you, as a professional, grow during this 2 years or whatever it was working with the Palms?
I learned how to do standard operating procedures, you know, and really learn how, you know, as long as you enforce key things and have the checks and balances, you can operate 5 different groups of people in 5 different places, and you only be one person.
What's the trick to enforcing standard operating procedures?
So checklists are a big thing, but it's also accountability of those checklists, you know? So a lot of people use checklists, but they don't ever, like the manager doesn't actually go through and check it themselves, you know? So if someone doesn't think they're going to get called out, they're more likely to just check it off. You know?
So we say this all the time in Restaurant Unstoppable Network. When I'm talking with the people that are in the network, you need checklists for the checklist checker.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying right
now.
Yeah.
100%.
So what does that look like?
So, there's one more thing I want to add. You also have to get buy-in from staff.
Okay.
You know, you really have to explain to them the use of the checklist, you know, and like, you really have to sell it to them. Like, look, if you use this, it seems like it's more work for some reason. Everyone thinks, it's going to add 15 minutes. You know, I'm like, it really adds 5. And you have no worries. Like, you're never going to be like, oh no, we don't have enough hot sauce or whatever.
Yeah, if it takes X amount of time to do it once, and that's a pain in the ass, how much more of a pain in the ass is it going to be to do it again because you didn't do it right because you weren't following the checklist?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And there's nothing more frustrating in the restaurant business at the end of the night in the middle of the night when there's just something that should be there and it's just was never
what's that
done.
going to take? Like in the middle of service, like how's that going to, you got to think about down the road. You got to be ahead of the experience.
Yeah, and that's when most like bad reviews and happen, and it's 'cause they don't know, but it's you're like, I was filling hot sauce. That's why it took me 6 minutes to get to you.
Let's go deeper into this. How you get buy-in. So you explain to them why the checklist works. What else?
I mean, I give them so this Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yes.
I learned a lot from that, and I just give them all the situations in my life where it's helped out, or I give anecdotes of, like shutting off the gas, like I was like, I relate to them a lot, or like locking the doors, like when you were a kid and you're like, oh no, I didn't lock the front door because you're, or with the gas, you're like, did I turn the gas off or did I not? And like, if you have a checklist, you don't ever have that feeling.
Yeah.
And I was like, isn't that worth, just
Exactly.
knowing that everything's okay?
I love it. The other thing that I've heard from a lot of people, as far as how to communicate the significance of a checklist, is to explain to them that, explains the human nature that people want to know what the job done right looks like. They need an aiming point. We all need it. We're not aware of it, but we need to know we're doing a good job. And a checklist ensures. It gives you that, it silences that anxiety, like, did I shut the burner off or like whatever? You need to know that like you're hitting your mark so you can move on, right? And I think it's one of those things we're not aware of. It's internal, but if help bringing that to people's attention too.
Yeah, it does. Like as an entrepreneur, I've been through highs and lows, and there's times when like everything's moving quick, and then sometimes you do get overwhelmed and you forget your own rules. And there's just no doubt, like when you use a checklist and you have a list, life is just better, easier.
And
smoother.
where do these checklists live? How are they organized?
Yeah, so we have one like group computer so we're opening more locations, so we're starting to create bigger and bigger systems for it that are more replicatable. But we just have one computer that prints everything, and those are the living ones. And then important thing is that those are living checklists, because whenever our employees will, like, I don't want to say complain, but they'll bring up something that was frustrating. I tell them at the end of the night on the checklist to write that on the bottom.
Yep.
And then on Sundays, my managers go through the checklist, and any notes they go, oh, that's a really good point. Let's add that to the checklist.
And what's really great right now with the world we live in is we have cloud-based documents where we can create one document on Google Drive or Google Docs or whatever, right? And then that's the master document, and everyone has access to it. So if there's a change made, it's the same change being made for everyone.
Yeah. So when we have more locations, we'll probably be moving towards that way. There is something to say, though, with sometimes simplicity is a great thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes having a piece of paper just is easier.
Well, yeah, you need a master, though.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we have that master, exactly.
Yeah.
So
where did you guys go to get your checklists? Now that you're away from the big corporation, like how did you, because I'm sure you have checklists. I mean, we're talking more SoCal Cantina now. Maybe we hold off on that, or maybe now's a good time to talk about it. Like did you steal these checklists from your previous jobs, or did you go to a resource to get a baseline?
So yeah, I mean, I just made an Excel sheet.
Okay. It's that simple, really.
And opened it up.
There are some great tools out there, and I got to give a plug to Sweet Process, that if you're somebody who isn't necessarily great with spreadsheets and you need a little bit of structure and guidance, Sweet Process is a cloud-based website, basically, where you can enter and organize all of your checklists, processes, procedures, protocols. So if you're somebody who needs if you're not good at building things, and you want to centralize all of your processes and your systems, I would definitely check out Sweet Process for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Anything else during this time at the Palms that's worth getting into before we move on? As far as how you grew as a professional.
Yeah, I mean, so the same thing. I also learned how the checklist didn't work. How quality could fall off with certain bartenders. Like not everyone is the same worker, is going to get the same care. So you have to start to learn how to get those people to buy in, or how to hire people that are going to buy in.
Can you give me an example of that?
Just like lime juice not being double strained by everyone, and it is hard as when you run 5 places and you have 5 managers for each of those places, and they're not all necessarily going to do all the steps all the time.
Yeah.
And it's catching that and seeing that, and how to make sure that it's not a repetitive thing.
Yeah. And there's some tools for that too. If you're like at the point where you have 5 or more units, you just can't be everywhere, I would say check out Jolt, which is basically it's a tablet based, where when people are going through the checklist, they have to use the app to complete the checklist. So if a checklist doesn't get completed by a certain time, you as the director of operations can get an alert saying so-and-so locations behind on their checklists.
Yeah.
So you get pinged. Or if you finish a checklist, you have to take a photo of the job done right, so you can see from wherever you are that the checklist wasn't completed right. So there's tools that's a cool thing about, and these tools are available to small unit operators, which is really exciting.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so, we've adopted some of them right now because we have one location and it's not super necessary.
No.
But when we're opening these others, like I have looked at Jolt, like that's a really cool option. Like one that we actually did implement it's called Margin Edge.
Oh.
Have you heard of that one?
Yes, I have. Past sponsor of the show, but they're more of like an all-in-one platform, are they not? Or
they're in the. I feel like there needs to be more like of an all-in-one platform, but they're really just like cost and training.
Yes.
Yes. And they just added labor, but it's just good to give. Like I said, knowing those percentages, and as long as I know that we're hitting all those numbers on our on our prime costs, I know that we're doing okay. And Margin Edge is a good option to like give you like a bird's eye view of it. Nice.
That's a little shout out for a past sponsor as well. Okay. Any other lessons? Any other ways that the Palms help set you up for success to be doing what you're doing now, scaling quickly, like corporate level?
It showed me kind of how a lot of influencers don't make a difference in your business.
What do you mean by that?
Because I spent a lot of time, wowing these critics and all these video bloggers
as an influencer, or were you the influencer, or were you wowing
both.
these influencers?
I mean, I guess I was an influencer because people would follow me too there, but they all had between like 10 and 30,000, and this was the time when a lot of them were going, being like, hey, I have 50,000 people following me. Can I get a free night stay? And I'll put a post up. And I'm sure you've seen like the back and forth between some like owners where they're like, you can buy a room like everyone else.
Yeah.
And that was the first time when I realized I was like, some of those are bought, and like just because someone sees something doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go. It's very hard to have a direct turn from social media to visiting your restaurant or hotel. So do you suggest people using influencers or not? I think it depends on the influencer and their audience. So just make sure that you're really looking at what it is. What are those 10,000 followers? Exactly. And and ask for their actual engagement so you can see what's happening. Honestly, I think society in general, like I'm not going to sit here and argue that social media doesn't work. It absolutely does. Yeah. It has an impact on your business for sure. However, my question is, why are we letting it? At some point, like, why are we focused more on how many followers we have than the person that's sitting right across from me? Mm-hmm. And I think that to do social media, to build a following, it's a lot of work. People don't realize it. And it's hard to do the details well and focus on social media. So like, I think a lot of people get so focused on trying to get followers and projecting this image of what they want people to think of them instead of actually being that thing. Yeah. Yeah, no, I've had a lot of thoughts on this, and basically where I'm at now is we still use our page and we communicate through it, but we don't really try to grow it necessarily, because I look at it more like, the two most important things in a restaurant is atmosphere and then the actual product. Yeah. Right. So as long as I have a cool space, and if I have something that is already Instagrammable just because it's delicious and people love it, they'll do the marketing for me. They'll take the picture of it. They'll post it on their social media. And I don't need to hit 1 million people all over the country. I just need to hit their 500 friends in Miami that are like, you guys do Crunchwrap Supremes? Dude, what? I did Crunchwrap Supremes on Valentine's Day. I don't know, long story behind it, but you can make Crunchwrap Supremes from home, and they're so much fun to make at home. Just, I don't know, side note. I don't know why I'm mentioning this, but dude, Crunchwrap make a good one at SoCal too. They're so good, dude. I'm definitely getting one before I go. That's super fun to hear because I literally just recently learned how to make them from home. So sorry, I got a little geeked out there. Anyway, backstory, backing up a little bit. Back to influencers. One of the reasons why I brought this up is because I saw somebody the other day. They're like celebrating 10,000 followers, and it was like this big like. I'm like, is that the world we live in today, where we're celebrating how many followers we have? Some do. I mean, you got to remember though, those are also, there's not like, I've never celebrated that. I just think we just put so much value on that. For sure. They're not real relationships. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just something it's my issue with social media. I think we put too much emphasis on it, and we need to just like check ourselves. No, I agree. Actually, my business partner handles most of our social media stuff, and I'm like, I just do the work here and have the friends that I have, and whoever wants to follow us because our stuff's great and other people are posting it, great. Nice. Or this is something that we kind of started doing that's smart though, where like, so we don't really post it, but we do we take I can't think of what it's called, when you take a picture and it prints it out, a Polaroid. Yeah. Right. So we have a Polaroid, and we're getting them with our with our page on there. But so we're not actually doing it in the market. It's just we give those out, and if people take a picture of them and keep them, great. If they post a picture, great. But we don't really care. But that way, it's kind of like we're setting ourselves up for success on social media, but we're not letting it be a driver of our decisions.
Yeah. So when you're using, like, are there any other details regarding this Polaroid approach as far as tagging or things like that go along with it? Or
I think less is more always.
okay.
So just make sure there's a way for them to find you.
Back
You know,
to this.
but most of the people, like, you know, most of the younger users are really well versed in social media, so they're gonna tag the location on their own.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be back in the day, you'd have to be like, tag us, link us, hashtag, and list all that thing. Now I think, you know, it's better to just make sure that you concentrate on the concept so people want to do it on their own.
Yeah, I gotta go back to this this Crunchwrap Supreme thing, because I think there's like an opportunity with Crunchwrap Supremes because it's like a taco, but a little bit more intricate. But nobody focuses. Not nobody. There are a few people that have like cornered that market.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interested in ghost kitchens and you're trying to do something unique and own one thing really well, if your community's not doing Crunchwrap Supremes, there's an opportunity there. I'm just putting that out for anybody who's interested in getting involved with ghost kitchens. If you can own that search, I think that there's going to be a trend soon.
Yeah,
I'm just throwing it out there.
Like, so we used to just do it as a secret menu item, and you know, this is something actually I learned from Katsuya. It's called the Big 4 and Big 5, right? So like, and then someone can come into our restaurant, right, and they can get, you know, our pico and our San Diego taco and a Pacifico, and they'll be like, oh, that was a great, you know, little taco shop. But those are good items and those are delicious, but those are not the items I want you to have. Like, our nachos are insane. Our Crunchwrap is really outrageous. Our Gardner's margarita won best margarita 3 years in a row.
I know where I'm eating dinner tonight.
You know, but yeah,
I'm already here.
But I'm saying I tell that to a lot of our employees. It's like, it's important to let guests know that.
Yeah.
You know, be like, you know, maybe you want the pork taco, and obviously we haven't, and it's great. But I was like, you want to make sure that they have at least one of each of those items. Like, we want to make sure that they're tasting us on what our most wowing, you know, item is.
Everybody does tacos.
Yeah, because
right?
and there'd be times when people were like, you guys they'd see someone in there, you have a Crunchwrap? You're like, what? And like, we put it on the menu, and now it's our #1 seller.
I'm telling you, man, there's something happening with the Crunchwraps.
Yeah.
You guys should definitely do a ghost kitchen for Miami with Crunchwraps.
They do take a little time though, like compared to tacos to make. So like, our staff will sometimes laugh, like at the end I always try to, like, we do like a little, sometimes I'll bet like $1 with them and get like, how many tacos do you think we did, over under? So I'll pick the number, I'm like 480, and they'll be like, I think we did over that. You know?
Yeah, they are a little more, because you gotta sear both sides, you gotta seal it. But they're so fun. They're like Mexican tacos or Mexican. Well, that would be kind of like a burrito. I'm a huge fan of calzones.
Hamburger taco hybrid.
It's like a calzone kind of.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Yeah, it's like a crunchy
Mexican.
calzone.
Yeah,
but no, they're great.
So I'm like, I have like an affinity for calzones. So anything that's like bread wrapped with great stuff inside of it is like, just, I have to dive into it. Moving away from Crunchwrap Supremes, going back into SoCal Cantina. So let's start diving into like how this came to be. So how did you transition away from the Palms, and how did this opportunity come across you?
Yeah, so like I said, I was at the Palms. I was running restaurants for WoW and like really for bloggers. And then one day I just got a call from this guy named AJ Bilopondo, who I had met twice before, or 3 times before. Once he went to Cocktail Collection and he saw the whole thing. I did magic and cocktails for him. Once we played like Ultimate Frisbee together. And then one time I met him at a networking event, and he owned Doorstep Delivery, which was it was like Uber Eats right before Uber Eats got big, you know?
Okay.
And so he knew that he saw Uber Eats and DoorDash, and there's a couple others that they were all coming to Miami, and he's like, there ain't no way I beat them.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, 5 competitors. He's
Yeah.
like, I'm going to get swallowed up. It's like one of those might, you know, maybe 2 of those will win, but I have
Was
no
he able
chance.
to like sell his list to them by chance or anything?
Yeah, no, he ended up selling back to like the main company
That's
because
good.
he was like a subsidiary of them. So he did okay, but it was, you know, he's like, the gig was up. You know, he used to sell his, he wouldn't let any restaurants sell sodas, and he would sell the sodas on his own, and that's probably how he made all his money.
Oh, okay.
So he's like, you know, $4 a Pepsi, but he's like, I'm keeping all that.
Nice. So he approaches you.
Yeah, so he gave me a call, and he's like, hey man, I know you did pop-ups for a while. I have this opportunity to open a taco spot in Brickell. And I know you know what you're doing. You've done it for a while, and I know you're moving on, but you know, you mind if I pick your brain? And I was like, absolutely, man, I'd love to. So we talked about it it was like a 2-hour phone conversation. I gave him like basically everything I'm telling you now, but even more in depth about like the exact numbers, like all my real mess ups were, because I didn't want him to go through.
Yeah.
Because like I did all this work, you know, at this point, and I was still basically.
Wait, have we not gotten your real mess ups?
Huh?
Have we not gotten your real mess ups yet?
Well, I mean, all those were, I wouldn't even call them mess ups necessarily, but like, you know, within every day you learn, you're like, well, I'm not going to make that mistake again, you know, like just costing things and small things with the open up. I'll think of some of the specific ones in a second. But, you know, at the end of the day, like I had, in everyone else's eyes, I was probably wildly successful because I had opened 4 different bars, but like financially, like it's not, I had a couple $1,000s, you know, I was just not paycheck to paycheck at that point. You know, so I didn't feel successful in what I was doing, but I feel like I had earned a lot of knowledge and I knew what it would take. So I was just like, I'm going to give this all to him, and like maybe I can save him 5 years of, you know, ups and downs, and he can make a deal where it works out. And so halfway about at the end of the conversation, I was like, what about barman? Are you going to do any drinks? And he's like, well, it was a club that was giving their unused hours from 12 to 12. And he had like, there were 4 vendors and he had to go in and present a business for him. And he's like, well, you know, I don't know how that would work, you know, because they already have a cocktail bar and they really just want a restaurant. And I was like, well, you know, I got a pretty good name, especially right now. Cocktail Collection isn't going anywhere. I'm like, not a huge fan of what I'm doing right now. Like, I'm glad I did it, but it's time for me to go do my own thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I come up with a cocktail menu, you want to go 50-50? And he's like, oh, thank God. And so I was like, all right. And I was like, what are you doing tonight? And he's like, that's part of my mantra, do it now. And I was like, I can get out of work in an hour. I think it was like 10 p.m. So it was going to be 11.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll come over and we'll talk shop. And he goes, for real? I'm like, yeah, for real. And he's like, all right, I'll see you in 2 hours or whatever it was. So on the way over to go meet him, I took an Uber, and I was just I wrote out like a preliminary cocktail menu, and 8 of those cocktails are still on our menu today.
That's awesome, man. I love that story. Yeah. So one thing I love from what you just shared with us from this point, I love the 50-50 model. A lot of people are like, no, like more, like don't give away your profit. Here's the thing. It's not 50% you're losing. It's 50% you would have never had if you didn't have that other person to do what they do well. Because the market is so competitive now. I don't know. I'm sure there's some freaks of nature out there that can do it all. Most of us can't.
Yeah, I think it's going to help us when we're growing a lot too, because, you know, a lot of people get burnt out in the restaurant business because they feel like you have to be here 7 days a week because no one cares more than the owner, you know, which is true. But I have 2 of them. So, like, you know, there's been times where things have happened in our life where he can take 2 weeks off. I can take 2 weeks off, which is unheard of in this business. But because we're both very competent and involved, you know? Yeah, you make half, but it's a way better. And we'll open 2 restaurants together and 3 and 4.
But you can also divide and conquer when both are on site, right?
Yeah, and we have different skill sets, you know?
Exactly. So you can be a full package with other people. And it's also going to free you up to start other projects too. And I just think, I don't know, I love that 50% model. Plus, I feel like it's a good way to kind of spread the wealth too. Yeah,
so I would agree. Like the problem with the 50-50 model would be if it's someone who's just an investor, you know. But we were 50-50 partners, full sweat equity. Okay. You know, so like this is our baby.
And that's this location right here. The story you're telling.
No.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
That's a long story. Yeah. It's So I go in. So we have that. The meeting is in like 2 days. We walk in. AJ walks in first, and there's a group of like 5 guys, and then I walk in, and one of them stands up and he goes, "Is that Leo Holtzman?" And AJ looks at me and he's like, "Who are you?" And he goes to his other partners, "They cancel the meetings. These are the guys we want to run it."
Nice.
And AJ was like, "I guess I made the right decision."
Nice.
And that guy had just been to the Cocktail Collection, and he saw the same thing that I did, you know, cocktails and magic, and he's like, whatever they're dreaming up is going to be awesome.
Oh, that's awesome,
you know?
Man.
And so that started the deal there, and that was.
Time out.
Yeah.
When did this guy who stood up and said, is that Leo? Like, when did he discover you?
About 3 years ago, probably from that point first.
Was it from?
I think he actually met me once at Katsuya, and then he went to Cocktail Collection, and he was in Brickell a lot though. Like he's still involved in like a lot of events and stuff.
Is there a theme popping up here? You know, like you never know who's on the other side. Like every experience, every encounter is a future investor.
Yeah, the people you work with and the people you serve are always gonna, you know, some of them will be in your life forever in some way.
Yeah, I love it. So they choose you guys.
Yeah, so they choose us. We start to do it, and we're doing great. We're open for lunch. So we're open every day from 11 to 11:30, 7 days a week. And we do that for 7 months. And the club was pretty much failing overall. But what happened is there was like a bouncer at one of the nights that ended up, you know, there was a fight and they had to deal with a lawsuit. So they wanted out. So they ended up selling to someone else. Oh. And so we ended up losing our deal. So again, we went into work on Monday, and we got a call from our partners, and they said, "Hey, don't open the bar." And me and AJ are like, "What?" So obviously we go into the work to open the bar, and there's locks on the doors, all our stuff's in there, and they're like, hey, we had to sell the building. And so
this is the building that the original partners were finding you and AJ to run. They sold the building, they locked up the doors, all of your equipment's in there.
Yeah, and so we ended up getting it back, but we still had a contract with them that wasn't fully honored. And that's something you learn about contracts, is just because you need to know who signs it, and you need to make sure that it's backed by someone personal. Because just because you win a lawsuit doesn't mean you can get the money, you know, because you still got to garnish the bank account. And if the business has no bank account and it's LLC, you know, so that was a new one that I learned.
Yeah, you can't just make money up here.
Yeah, so we ended up losing probably, you know, over like $30,000 in that.
So wait, distill the lesson one more time. Just like really spell it out what the lesson is.
I would always make sure that you collect the money and then that you pay your partner, not the other way around. Because if they collect the money, they can just say, I'm not paying you, and to go after them is pretty difficult.
Okay. So when you're saying your partner, you're talking about these other guys, or are you talking about...
Yeah, the other guys. Because like they would have one POS system, and it kind of makes, you know, the partnerships a little difficult, but they would collect the money, and then every 2 weeks they would give us our percentage.
Okay.
So what happened in the last 2 weeks, they just didn't give us our percentage.
Because they didn't have it to give it to you.
I mean, they probably did, but they knew the situation. They're like, what are they gonna do?
Ugh.
You know,
I can't.
Especially since we kind of saved them. Like we did very well there. You know.
Yeah. It just bugs me that people think like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe
No.
they're up against it.
Well, you know, it's you just want to make sure you're super covered with the contract. You know,
Yep.
Spend some money on a lawyer, but really make it clear and make sure that you collect the funds.
So what's in the contract? What's the term? What's the expression? What's the sentence that needs to be in there?
There's not like a specific sentence. Every lawyer has like a different lingo over there, you know.
Okay.
But as long as you, I guess it's a new theory I have, but as long as you collect the money, it's better to get sued than to have to do the suing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because then you can say, okay, well, that's what I owe,
You
and
can
that's
always
what's
settle.
right.
Yeah.
You know, but the other way around, you have to. In our situation, we would have had to depend on those people just being upstand people, and you know,
Yeah.
money can change people sometimes. So
Yeah.
you want to take that decision away.
Gotcha. Okay. So you obviously it worked out because here we are today.
Yeah, so the next day, you know, me and AJ, you know, we had a little powwow, and he's really similar to me in the do it now philosophy, where we're not going to like sulk. He's like, what are we going to do? He's like, they've already sold the building.
Yeah.
He's like, they've already done this. Like, we'll contact the lawyer and deal with that. But we got people that wanted to come get tacos tonight and drinks, and we're starting to build a brand, and we know we can make this work. You know, because this was the time when I started designing the menu, and the concept went from a pop-up to I was like, yo, we have a really, really strong cocktail margarita concept that it does not exist anywhere that I've really seen. You know, there's other places that do it, but they're not doing it quite to the caliber we're doing or the style that we're doing.
Gotcha.
So we set up meetings, and he was in doorstep delivery, so he knew tons of restaurant GMs and owners in Brickell, and so he just called all of them and set up meetings, and then we met with these guys where we are today, and you know, they had 2 unused spaces that they did a lot of events with. Like, we're in an event room right now that they use, and we just talked to them about it, and we're like, look, this is what we're selling, this is our concept. And they're like, okay, the space we wanted, they said that was sold out for events too often, and it wouldn't make sense because they wanted to do like a continuous partnership.
Yeah.
Because I had also told AJ, I was like, I'm not doing 1 day a week.
Yeah.
We're doing 7 or none.
Yeah.
And then
You wanted your space.
Exactly. And then so they asked and then they're like, well, what about this little outside bar? You know, we're having issues running it. And we're like, okay, yeah, we can test that out. And they're like, when can you do it? And I was like, tomorrow. And they're like, no, for real. And I was like, tomorrow. I'm like, you think you can get people to come here and eat? And we didn't have a kitchen at that point because they still had another concept there, and get drinks. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, and you can execute? Yeah. And we did it. It cost us $900. We got like equipment. We worked, you know, through the entire night to get everything situated. Got all of our old equipment out there.
What were your expenses at $900?
Glassware, glass racks, making the bar efficient.
Yeah.
So like, you know, our style of cocktails it's a very unique bartending style, and our drinks are very particular to us. And so that if you don't, you know, this is probably like where magic comes in, you know, like, you know, a big thing for magicians, it's called pocket management.
Okay.
Right. So you know where every single little
Mise en
doodad
place.
in his every pocket.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
mise en place. But on a slightly different level, because you also have the most efficient route to get to everything.
Okay.
You know, because if you in magic, if I make a bigger movement covers a smaller movement, right? So you want to do like the closest switch, you know. So like for our cocktails, like all the bottles are grouped next to each other, so you don't have to move your hand too far. Like that's like a small little one. and just where every tool's placed and like how you rinse out your tin.
Okay, this is where I was starting to get. This is the kind of stuff I was hoping to get into when I shelved the "What have you learned about magic and how does that serve you as a bartender?" So it's just efficiencies, really. And
Yeah, like I would say, like if I, life after a restaurant, I would consider myself like an efficiency expert for,
do you
for the bar
consult
and
on
restaurants.
efficiency?
I have done it in the past. Right now, like
Not the bandwidth.
yeah, this is the focus.
Yeah.
We know we can open a bunch of these. We want to do like 4 or 5 in the next couple of years.
Gotcha.
So this is where like all my focuses are going. But I still do that all the time for our bar. Like we've changed sizes here 3 times now.
Wow.
You know-
Well, that's a cool thing. So let's get into that. So I pulled you off track. So you find this space. You're negotiating a section of this space, like an area of this building.
Yeah, it was their little outdoor bar. So at that point, it was like a 6-seat bar. What you see now is not the same. And then it had and that was it in the back, and it had 2 tables.
So how many seats are you guys using now?
Right now?
Yeah.
Right now we have about like 120.
120.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the reason why I love this approach. Because you start where you can. And that's 6 seats, fine. But if you can start someplace that gives you lateral growth over time as the demand's there, if you can knock down a wall or absorb that business or you know what I'm saying? If you can go into a building that has room for growth, if you can blow out a wall or expand to it, I love seeing that because you can take on what makes sense right now and it leaves room for natural organic growth, and you can take on more expense as you need it. But if you were to start with 120 seats, you might not be able to build up the reputation in the clientele to support that right away. It takes time.
Yeah, and especially if you need to work out a deal to make sure that the owners know you're not taking business from them. So that was something at first Tobacco Road, like we had an issue with when we were selling there. They were saying that the sales for the total building were going up not too much, but their business was continuously going down. So they were saying that, a lot of guests just are not going to our bar and they're just going upstairs to the new shiny bar. And I was like, and ultimately we talked it out and I was like, there is just no way that someone was coming here for a $2 warm beer and they decided to go get a $15 cocktail upstairs 12 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
And if they did, then the sales should be shooting up because now that $2 thing is, that much. So what we did when we first came here, we offered to only do tequila.
Okay.
So we only did tequila drinks. So that made them really comfortable. And then after they were like, you know what, you guys are doing a great job and it's a very different vibe. And they're like, offer what you want, make all the cocktails. And then they got the inside. There was a sushi place that was going out of business because this is a very eclectic building. So there's a little tiny kitchen in the center that the sushi kitchen used.
Okay.
And when they went out of business, we were doing great with just the drinks, and we did like guacs that we would make just for like chips and dips so that people would have something. And then that's when we, because it used to be SoCal Taco, and then we switched to SoCal Cantina because it was a smaller cantina vibe.
Okay.
And then they gave us this little kitchen, and that's when we started doing tacos.
So real quick, just take us through the evolution from 2016 to now, but without getting into detail, but just kind of paint that picture of how you guys grew.
Yeah. All right. So we had a meeting with them and did a one-day pop-up where all we offered were cocktails, and we did chips and guac that we pre-made. And then they said, hey, that was great. We came back the next day and did it again, and that kept happening for a week. And then we're like, okay, now let's talk. And so we set up a deal to be there for a much longer time. And then after about 2 months of that, they opened the kitchen. So we started making tacos in there. So AJ was in the back, I was in the front. And then we started offering tacos on their side because we had few people in our space to eat. And we can only serve 12 people at a time, but everyone else was waiting. So they're like, well, why don't you guys just sit at our empty tables over here? And then after that, we started to do some expansion work. So we made a bigger bar. Then we knocked down our back wall and took over this alley space and turned it into this whole alley that you see. And now it is where it's at. And now it's, during COVID, they closed down their other concept, and then we we have even extra space just for this interim period.
So prior to COVID, how long were you operating at this capacity?
At what size?
The 120. At what point?
The 120. Oh, so before COVID, we were at probably only like 60 seats.
Okay.
So
and how long did it take you to get to 60?
It took about probably about a year and a half.
Okay. See the natural organic growth, like, because
Yeah.
you don't out of the gates have the kind of volume to sometimes offset your expenses. So if you can start small and grow organically, I think it's just huge.
Yeah, and to get 40 of those seats, like we had to do construction. So and we were still building from the last thing, and I had all those mini failures and hardships. So I didn't really have the funds to do it, and it was $60,000 to open the space, but it opened up
You didn't
5
even-
new tables.
Yeah, you didn't even have a kitchen. You
Yeah.
know, like it's just like if you do something right, like the opportunity will show up. Just do it. What was it? Or just
do it now.
Do it now, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing it now and you're doing it right, like opportunity will come, for sure. So okay, reflecting back at the past 5 years, what were the biggest challenges for you guys, or biggest mistakes you made?
I don't really have any specifics, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like little ones with like managers that you hire and like, you know, mishirings, and trying to think if we ever we probably like an early overextension because we did open a location on South Beach.
Okay.
But to be honest, it did well, and we could have still operated if we just had a chance to get out. And South Beach is a very strange market that's been confirmed this week, you know. But that was hard to have 2 places with only me and AJ, and we didn't have any bankroll, so we were still like paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
You know, clearing that, and it was probably too soon of an expansion. So we did well, and we could have made it work, but it was definitely an undue amount of stress. You know, you definitely want to make sure that you have, you know, 3 years at a space.
So if you could have do it all over again, this expansion, what would you have done differently?
For the next location is
Well, this expansion to South Beach,
Yeah.
if you could have done it over, and if you did something differently,
I would have waited, and I wouldn't have done the same type of deal we did. So like the doing a percentages and operating in another business, and it's been helpful that I'm an efficiency guy because we have to come up with a lot of different systems because there's 4 operations in this one building, you know, so you have a lot of trouble with space and all that. And so we went and we did it again. So it's a lot of labor intensive.
Yeah.
So it was really easy to set up when it was me and AJ because we're the 2 owners and we're making sure everything's taken care of. But when we expanded and we had to hire other people, you know, some of those systems dropped off, and they dropped off as we opened another one. So I was just working double time going between the 2.
so your systems, you created them, but they weren't being carried out.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, so I learned that, you know, that's when I learned that you have to checklist for the checklist.
Yes. Yeah. It's huge. So you said you would have waited specifically for what?
See, I'm thinking about it now, and it's kind of an interesting thing because we were also a small space and we didn't have that extra seating that we have now.
It also
So
contradicts everything you've been saying. Just do it.
Huh?
Just do it now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as opening that location, just because
Yeah.
we weren't financially viable for
Yeah.
it. You know, like I was basically doing it. Like I feel like this is a good way to say it. A pop-up it's good for your first space. It's not really great for your second.
Okay.
You know, so
Gotcha.
because like there are a lot of more headaches. There's a lot more issues that you have to as market it. So I feel like if we would have that second location instead of doing if we would have taken the extra time and like gotten like a 5-year lease together and had a stronger plan instead of just like doing a pop-up again,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been as much headaches.
Got you.
But it
Maybe-
was also good that we did it because since it was a pop-up, I didn't lose my shirt on it.
That's true. Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
So-
Anything? Sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so I guess I don't regret doing it now because I found out, you know, like I said, here's a good thing for your deals. You also want to make sure that you have a way to get out. You know, a lot of time
Back doors.
investors don't like that because they're like, oh, what, you're planning on failing? You know, and then I just tell them, I was like, every restaurant can fail. Like there's a million reasons that it's not going to work, you know, that are out of your control.
Yeah. And that's something we don't talk a lot about on the show, but super important is having an exit strategy for everything you do. Because ideally you want it to work out, but most times it doesn't.
Yeah, like there was I think I forget the name of the bar, but it's an anecdote that some guys have told me, and it was a bar that was really successful, had a great crowd, and it was in New York City, and then they had to close the subway for 2 years for whatever reason because they were doing construction on it, and it wasn't planned maintenance. So this bar went from being the most accessible to the least accessible space.
Was that the Avery?
No, it was like by Joshua Tree or something like
Okay.
that, but
Because I know the Avery shut down in New York City.
it could
Maybe they shut down in Chicago. I don't know.
did they? Well, I don't know.
No, I was curious about the Avery and you and your approach because I'm thinking about your efficiencies, and I want to do you guys like the Avery? If you aren't familiar with the Avery, what's unique about the Avery is they treat the back bar, they treat the bar like a kitchen where everybody, you know, they'll have a station for garnish, they'll have a station for, I don't know enough of the bar terminology, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
When they bring it together at the pass. Right,
Yeah.
but they have a position for every element of the drink, and then they bring it together at the pass. So you could be, instead of having one bartender that's responsible for everything, you can, you know, divide and conquer like a kitchen does.
Yeah.
Do you guys do anything like that?
I might take some ideas from it, but I do feel like I like the idea of having a bar and watching you make the cocktails, and I
Yeah.
like the, you know, so we do have like some teamwork bartending stuff that we do that like speeds it up. You know, like
Yeah.
when we do our service bar, you know, there's a very tricky way to get drink times cut off. You know, like our service bartender doesn't place glassware.
Okay.
The drink runner rims all his glasses, places all his glassware, and ices all of his drinks. So our service bartender has to do is just crank out cocktails the entire time.
Nice.
So I'm cutting out, you don't realize it, but ringing up. It's the same thing with your bartenders. Like if you teach them how to make a drink in under a minute, but it takes them, a minute and a half to find the button on your POS, what was the point of all that training? You have to look at it from every angle. And I was timing them, and when I first started, I would only time them when they started to make the drink. I would let them do the setup, and now I'm like, I'm not going to tell you anything. I just clock it right away, and you have to go and rim your glass. And sometimes it takes like 20 seconds to, we have some complicated rims, so it takes a little bit of time, 20 seconds to rim a glass. And that's time that, your drink runner can just do for you. And you can pump out those drinks way faster than anyone thought you could.
Interesting. We're at an hour and a half of recording time right now. It goes by so fast. I've been loving this conversation. But I'm curious. I do want to get a little bit more, if you have any other elements that you think being, like some of the tricks you've taught your team about incorporating magic with service and how that kind of heightens the experience that you can share with our listeners. If there's anything that comes to mind that hasn't come out already, I want to give you an opportunity to drop that on us. And plus anything else you were hoping we would discuss that we haven't discussed up to this point. I know you're scaling. You have how many locations? One now, right? But
yeah, we have one right now. We're opening one in Tuscaloosa.
Okay.
So we're in construction right now. I go in a couple weeks to go check it out. And that should open in like August or September.
And then you have plans for Texas, I think.
Yeah, so we're going out in Texas to possibly do something out there in Austin.
Yep.
And then those are pretty much the two main places that I want to be. I think those are the best markets. And then, the main goal is to have 3 locations in each city, and that's about it.
Okay.
Because then you can have a commissary kitchen, and you can really save on like certain labor and control.
Gotcha. So, paint to the big picture. Back to that. Any elements of service that you've heightened because of your experience with magic that you can share with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's a ton of little things that just add up, but like to really take it, like, it is a show. Like a lot of bartenders, I remember when they're coming up with all these different ways to handle pour cost. They had like the pour spouts, and there's so many different ways to do it, and there was a general consensus, but no one can really articulate it, that we all hated it.
Yeah.
And as a bar business owner, is just like, he just sees the numbers and he's like, it's just pouring the liquor out. But there is something beautiful about watching a great bartender work. So I just took that to the next level, So I really teach them. I was like, always think about like you're taking a picture and doing a show. So you want to make sure like the drink is placed in the center of it, that you're drawing attention to it, make sure that all your products are displayed correctly. You want to have mise en place everywhere. And then you want to really look at the like, it's good to like take videotapes of you making a drink, and you really want to look at something that looks like a pause or something, or whenever something's not completely fluid, and figure out why and how to make that better, because like every aspect from the beginning to the end of the drink making process, including ringing it in, ringing it up, like even with our the way I have my guys do our checkbooks and our training, I time them on that. When you print it and how you put it in, because sometimes I'll watch someone work and they're trying to get that receipt, 3-4 times in the slit, slot, and they just can't get it. And I was like, why'd you make the drink in a minute? You wasted all the time doing that. Same with bussing. I do bussing Olympics, and sometimes my team they're like, man, you're just so competitive. And I'm like, but I'm always a good sport. I don't like berate anyone or anything like that. Like, and they all get into it. So even like last night, I was at the bar. And one of our guys, Isaac, he's like, ooh, single Gardner's margarita. He's like, Leo, can you time me? And I have a whole list on my phone of all their cocktail times at all times. And they always, is that a new record? And I think that's important to get your staff into it. And then sometimes they'll come up to me and they'll be like, hey, I found out a faster way to do this, and it's just like twisting your wrist in a certain way.
Yeah.
Like this is a cool example for magic. So if we do a drink that has a full double rim, right?
Okay.
So we rim it lightly in sugar, and then we run it through salt. So it almost has like a kettle corn taste to it. It's sweet and salt. That's the Gardner's. But that rim obviously takes a while. So what you're supposed to do is you hold it it's a magic grip called the claw, right? And you hold the bottom of the glass like that, and you can twist your fingers. So you only get like 10 to 15 degrees of it. And then you also can twist your wrist, and then you can twist your shoulder. So when you put that into the orange and you undo it, it goes a full circle. So you get 360 degrees. And then same thing, you do that same motion in the sugar and the salt, and it cuts out a lot of time from someone who was, when they use 2 hands to kind of like rotate the glass.
I love that. So I'm making notes over here because you're dropping a lot on us. You're into it. So some of the things that I've pulled, the first thing, if you want your team to be into it, you've got to be into it, and you're clearly into it.
Yeah.
And when they see that you're into it, you bring them up to that level. You're bringing them in on your excitement, your love for it, right? And they feed off that energy. The other thing that came out of this is the great game of business. Business is just a game, but like every game, you need to keep score. Numbers are great for that, right? Like there's so many different things you can measure, whether it's efficiency, like what you chose to do. Your score is the time. You made it all about efficiency and time, right?
Yeah.
The other thing you can use is obviously money, revenue, because these are numbers. And when you make it about the game, about beating the number, right? Whether it's time or cost, or like lowering your costs or increasing your profits, like the great game of business, right? Like they make it into a game, and it sounds like that's what you've done.
Yeah. I guess I did with everything in my life, but yeah,
It's
exactly. It makes it more exciting, and it also, it lets everyone else buy into it because they can see that they can make a difference and change it. And I always tell them, I was like, and the reason the bartending the bar program is where it's at is because I always bring in input, and I tell that to my staff. I always want them to be included. So I was like, if I do anything and you think there's a better or faster way, please tell me.
Thank you, Ryan.
And and we will race.
Yeah.
We will see how it is, and we'll see it, and we'll say, well, that is a better way. But look, it makes a really like sloppy rim, so I don't think we're going to be able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm loving this conversation. Is there anything we have not touched on up to this point that you think would bring a ton of more value? You've already dropped a ton of value. Anything that I just missed that you think we should discuss before we go to the speed round?
Yeah. I would say probably a big aspect that makes us successful in our restaurant is that we're not afraid to even spend the money to move walls to make things more efficient.
Yeah.
And like I think a lot of restaurants, they might do something and it works, and so they're just happy with it. They're not always improving. And we've had no choice because we've gone from 12 seats to 20 seats to 40 seats to 80 seats to 100 seats to 120. And even now, like I'll look, I'm like, oh, how can we add one more table in here? But by doing that, you're putting extra strain on the ecosystem of the restaurant. So even right now we're going through it because, we just had spring break. So like we've actually like doubled our sales in the last 4 weeks, every week.
Wow.
And we've done it with 4 less people than we've ever had on staff.
Wow.
And what we had to do was change a ton of our systems and how, certain things that we can pre-set up and not pre-set up to make sure that we can serve that many people. You
just hit on something that's, I think, really key, which is a lot of people are looking. We're still in COVID, so it still hurts a lot. But I think that we learned it forced us, the industry, to get so efficient because we had no choice.
Yeah.
And I think that a good byproduct of COVID-19 is that we notice all these efficiencies, and we found ways to be as a collective, as an industry, to be more efficient. I think it's going to take the whole industry to the next level. And I encourage you that if you found ways to be more efficient, don't dump those. Like you increase the standard of operation, right? Stay there and continue to operate at those efficiencies. And it sounds like that's what happened with you guys. What's going through your mind as I share this?
100%. I mean, I was just thinking about all my staff. Like, I'll tell them about all these efficiency ideas, and I think one reason they come back to me is because, like I explain, like I'm trying to make it more efficient, not so you can do more work, but so you have more time with the guests. Like, what we have to get done is already what we have to get done. I'm just trying to make your life better, smoother, easier, faster.
Yeah.
And you do make more money at a restaurant. Like, a lot of restaurants have trouble with this. Like, our guacs can come out in a minute, and our drinks are complicated, so they can take up to 3 to 5. And that's the kiss of death if the food hits first,
Right.
And I tell them how important it is to just make sure the drinks hit first. And half of that is them timing their menu and knowing it, but also half of it is making sure that my guys are always efficient and ready to go.
Yeah. So any technologies you've adopted in the past 12 months to be more efficient, to streamline process?
Well, with COVID, we had to bring on, we used to not have that much table service.
Okay.
And when we added the tables, we brought on open table, margin edge. We brought on just to make sure that our costs are exactly in line, because they manage all your prices. So like, with COVID, a lot of like lettuce would go up all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So it was good to know exactly what was happening in real time.
Yep.
And then bar metrics is an important one that we use.
Okay. What's bar metrics?
So they tie up, it's an inventory system, and they tie up with your POS with each individual bottle and all your recipes. And so every week I get the exact cost of every single bottle pour.
Okay. And what POS is it?
It ties up with a bunch, but we use Toast.
Okay.
So it ties on with them. There's a bunch other that it uses, but that's a good report. And every week on Tuesday, I put it behind the bar, So, and then we have meetings with them every couple months, like, so new staff gets like re-upped on how it's used, but the bartenders get into it. As long as, I think sometimes that technology can be the kiss of death for some owners because they can get too tied into the numbers. And I never look at the numbers that we did in the past as like profit lost. I looked at as lessons learned, like if our vodka costs were off, and I explained to them, I was like, that's sales we both lost together, because 50% might have just been unaccounted for, but 50% could have been miss rings. And there's no real line of defense for if you're busy at a bar and the bartender forgot to ring in something and the manager just can't be there at all times. And he's like, was it 2 rounds or 3 rounds? And it definitely slips through the cracks for everyone and every once in a while. And I think them showing the numbers and they're like, my service bartenders were like, how'd that happen? They're like, there's no way. They're like, all I did was care about it. And I was like, well, let's talk about last week. And that's when like, you know what? That makes perfect sense. There was like, I'm thinking about that night when we got hit really hard and I probably did miss out. And that actually explains why we're off exactly by 4 shots of vodka.
That's awesome. Okay. So almost ready for the speed round. One last question. The mission is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. Restaurant Unstoppable's mission. I truly believe that if we can transform the restaurant industry, we can transform the world because this industry touches so many people. So with that said, how have you transformed? Who is Leo today versus the Leo when you got into this industry?
Well, that's a good question. I would actually say when I first, I haven't fully made the complete transition to that, but I would say when I first started, I never thought that I would do this. So I was just learning everything and taking everyone's advice because there was no way that I was an expert in anything.
Yeah.
And now I think I still hold on to that. So I still am the student, and I still, every time I go into a bar, I look behind the bar and I look at their setup and I look at the bartenders and I see, and I'm like, okay, now we can order a drink. Whether it's bad or good or positive or negative, I just like to see how they operate because I'm always trying to learn. But I definitely think I have taken that step now a little bit more into like the mentor field. So I kind of know what I'm doing, and I'm more learning through teaching. And you learn a ton through teaching.
Yeah.
Like my bartenders still race me in cocktails, and I still hold most of the records proudly, which makes me happy and sad because I want someone to beat me. But they're like, why are you still good? You don't bartend anymore. You bartend like twice a year.
Muscle memory, man.
It's muscle memory. And I was like, because I'm constantly telling you guys what mistakes you're making, so I'm not making those simple mistakes.
Yeah.
I don't try to go fast. I try to just not make those mistakes that you guys are making.
Yeah.
And and they've been taking that to heart the last couple of weeks, and I see a difference.
We're back, and the first question I have for you is, what is your it factor, a habit, a trait, a characteristic you believe most contributes to your success?
Perseverance.
What is your biggest weakness?
Trust.
What is one thing or question you ask or thing you look for during the interview process when you're growing your team?
Future plans.
What is your biggest challenge today, and how are you dealing with it?
Hiring, and we're making things more efficient than we ever thought we could.
Share one code. Wait, more efficient in the hiring process or compensating because you don't have the people?
Compensating because we don't have the people.
Okay,
like we added a drink runner.
Got it. Share one code of conduct or behavior you teach your team.
Accountability.
What is one uncommon standard of service you teach your team? So it's something that's common within the 4 walls of your business, but not common throughout the industry to go above and beyond.
Also, I don't know how to answer one word, but treat people like they're a guest in your home, not like they're a guest in your restaurant.
I love it. What is one book that's a must read to make us a better person or restaurant owner?
Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
What was your biggest lesson from that book?
Oh man, there's a ton. I use them in every day, but one of them is that a person's name is the sweetest sound they've ever heard.
Yes, I love that. And that book is on audio. So if you head over to audibletrial.com/unstoppable, you can get that book for free if you're not already an audio book listener on Audible, and you're supporting the show. And I love that book, man. The biggest lesson for me in that book is, dude, people just love to be loved. If you give love, you get love. It's that simple.
Yeah. And it's a good thing with I tell my staff, obviously you get guests that are from all walks of life and have different opinions of you.
Yeah. And
I always try to tell them, and it was something I learned in Magic too that we didn't really touch on, but someone said, be their champion.
Yeah.
Right? No one sees a magician go onto the stage. No one comes into a restaurant and they're like, man, I hope this sucks.
Right.
Like they go in expecting the world. So
Yeah.
if they don't do that, we should look within, because then we fail to deliver, or fail to explain, or fail to show them what we really have to offer.
Beautiful. Name one service you've hired or outsourced to. So this isn't a technology, but this is a person or a group of people that do something well that you've outsourced to.
I guess Barmetrics.
Okay. I'll take it. It's a technology too, but it's
Like
is it not, or do they just come in
Yeah.
and do all your measuring?
Huh?
Do they come in and do your
Yeah,
inventory?
they do the
Oh, okay.
inventory.
Nice. Perfect.
It's always better to have a third party inventory.
I love it.
It's stupid to make your managers do it.
Right?
'Cause,
They're based in Florida, aren't they?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Name one technology that you've outsourced within the recent past that has had a huge influence in operations
In the past 12 months, I would say.
or beyond. We can pick anything.
Yeah, I would say Margin Edge.
Margin Edge. Good. I love it when sponsors get recommended organically on the show. That makes me feel really great. So this is the last question. It's a doozy. Get ready for it. If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants will be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity and for your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
Do it now is definitely the first one I would tell them all the time.
1.
Be what you know you can be,
2.
and try to be empathetic with everyone.
3. I've loved this conversation, Leo. Thank you so much. We wrap up every chat by calling somebody out. Who is somebody you respect and admire in this industry? Somebody for me to go after as a future guest. Call them out.
Yeah. I would say Jose Mendon. I always look for flavors that, that, like I said, like the crunch wrap, like you get addicted to, like something that you eat and you're like, I can't not have that again. And he always does that in his restaurants.
Jose, look out. I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. You're on my radar. You've been on my radar. We're going to make it happen eventually. And how can we connect with you if we really enjoyed this episode and we want to connect with you?
Yeah, probably Instagram's the best way, cocktail_conjure. And you can also reach me through that or through our SoCal Cantina Instagram, either one of those, and also through our website at socal-taco.com. All those emails still go personally to me, so I read them all.
Nice. And if you're listening to this episode and you want to meet Leo during a live Zoom call, Leo has agreed to join us live in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer any of your questions. So if you had questions that were in the back of your mind and you want to join the network and meet Leo and get some peer mentoring, we are going to arrange that. So come hang out in the network. I'd love to have you guys join, and you can meet Leo. And Leo, just thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, your knowledge, and your mentorship. There is no questioning, my man. You are unstoppable.